Welcome to the Glazier Nation podcast, where we uncover the best stories and the best practices of the glass and glazing industry. Whether you're a seasoned vet or just starting out your journey, this show's a great place for entertainment and a deeper understanding of our industry. I'm your host, John Spellman, and I'm truly honored to take you beyond the glass. Welcome back to the Glazier Nation podcast. My guest this week is Brad Glauser. Brad is an owner and partner of Edify Studios. Brad does a great job expanding in this podcast, but very generally speaking, Edify Studios is an independent rep for fenestration products. Brad's got a very broad background all through our industry as a general contractor, a glazing subcontractor, a manufacturer's rep, and now an independent rep. So I wanted to try and pick his brain on the different perspectives he's learned moving between those different stakeholders. We talked about that, we talked about innovation in products and meeting code, and we talked about Brad's decision to start his own company. I had a blast chatting with Brad, and I hope you enjoy the show. The Glazier Nation podcast is sponsored by Glazier Nation. You can check out all their offerings at glazernation.com. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast or other marketing opportunities, go to glazernation.com/marketing. And if you have questions for me or you know someone that would make a great guest for the show, you can contact us on any of our social medias at Glazier Nation Podcast. We've got glass stuff to talk about. We want to talk about products. We want to talk about innovation. We want to talk about you. We want to talk about your company. But I started going down a rabbit hole just now, the Edify podcast and University of Utah.
Yes, sir.
And this is a common theme that I've found among second, third generationers is when we try to leave the industry. I went to Utah.
Okay. All right.
And the plan was really to be a snowboarder, but the plan turned into being a bartender / snowboarder.
Yeah, well, that's the way you support the other side of the hill, man. You know.
Well, what happened is I was teaching snowboard lessons during the day, right?
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
I was bartending at night, and I was making about 4 times as much money bartending.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't have to babysit 7, 8-year-old kids. I could just go snowboard all day if I didn't do that.
Good for you. So, what took you to Salt Lake? Just because you wanted to snowboard?
Well, a friend's parents had a place.
Okay.
The first time. So the first time I went was just for a winter.
Got it.
We went and did a winter. I went home, finished college, and then there's a little more story in there involving a girl, and a breakup. But then moved back out to Utah.
Okay.
Ended up staying there for 3 years the second time.
So you boomerang back and
just loved the Park City vibe, the small town, yes. Big mountain vibe. The people were cool. The snow was great.
It's beautiful out there, man.
Just dug the vibe, dude. But I don't think I could do it now. I'm 10 years in Florida, man. I don't know if I can do cold again.
Yeah, no. Once you get south of that, I don't know, man. There's this line where you go south, all of a sudden your bones start to warm up. You get a little comfy, you get a little nice, you kind of end up just traveling horizontally, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you don't really travel vertically in the country, you know, like
that's right.
Pacific Northwest, it's essential to travel vertically in the winter. Like that's just a part of life, man.
Yeah.
That's just my kids, just growing up like here and like having my kids grow up. It's like, we just know that we're going to fly south for the winter for at least a week, you know.
Where would you go? Where would you go north? Vancouver? That's about it.
Yeah.
Right?
The great secret of the Northwest is that it's beautiful during the summer. You know this, right? It's absolutely gorgeous. So you don't go anywhere, probably from about May, all the way through like maybe end of October, really.
Okay.
And that stretch, because it has a little bit of that Indian summer vibe kind of in the Pacific Northwest. So that late August, early September, early October are just gorgeous. Yeah.
You ever get up to the San Juan Islands?
Oh yeah. It's kind of like one of those ferry rides that you take when the people come into town and stuff like that, or if they're going to go camp in
tourist
Island. Yeah, for sure.
My mind was blown when I saw the deer swimming from island to island.
Yeah, they just do it. Like, it's beautiful. It's the kind of how they migrate between the different areas and stuff like that, and they just understand it. But no, what's crazy about it is when you fly over them, you don't realize how many San Juan Islands are out there.
Yeah.
The map doesn't even do it justice. They're all over. They're just tiny. They're little. They're long. They're skinny. It's awesome. It's a real cool little part of America for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was cool. My Pacific Northwest experience is pretty limited, but Seattle, Vancouver, San Juan Islands, Portland, those highlights, I guess.
Yeah, like I said, I love the destination that it is. It's like you can't go further west in a way. So like when you're going to travel to the coast, you're on the destination, so you can kind of go up and down the coast, and you're always at the destination. It's just absolutely gorgeous out there during the summer and even the winter months too, because you're not getting any like major snow or anything like that. You'll get the gray skies, a little bit of rain and stuff like that, but it still is epic and gorgeous out there regardless of the time of year for sure.
So let's get to the glass. Let's get to first. Give me kind of the elevator spiel of Edify Studios. I mean, you're an independent rep, but I'm sure there's more to it, right? What's Edify?
No, absolutely. So since 2018, my business partner and I, Brad Walker, started Edify Studios. I come from the manufacturer most recently to that. Most come from the manufacturing side of things. I was a rep previous to this, but I'm more of an employee basis for a national manufacturer, and got to know the curtain wall and window industry quite well. In that world, as far as manufacturing design, prior to that, kind of in the subcontractor, glazing subcontractor world, and fourth generation general contractor. So the whole construction architectural world has kind of ran through my blood forever.
Sure.
And so this has kind of been that natural migration into what we wanted to really kind of create. And as my business partner, Brad Walker, and I got together, he comes more from that subcontractor side of things, large glazing subcontractor. And we didn't really want to have kind of like that B&B architectural products or something that was just kind of like a generic place of just saying, hey, we rep these lines.
Right.
We wanted to really kind of brand it with Edify Studios. Edify is defined in a way that improves both mind and character. And so we took the word edify and then brought it into kind of that studio sense of like giving it more of that architectural solution base, because we felt that the track record and the projects that we had worked on were there to really kind of define what we wanted to really kind of employ for our projects. Is that we want to not only bring products, but really architectural solutions that we're going to basically move that milestone schedule forward, that milestone budget forward, and really kind of make sure there was a full architectural solution through it. So bringing that in kind of into that rep world was a new concept, I think. So we have a pretty specific process that we go through when we look at projects. With that strategic focus.
Yeah. Give me a little highlight on that of like what would you guys be doing differently than say just that I'm not going to knock the guy, I still respect the hustle, but just the guy with the line card.
Yeah, I mean, no, when we don't shy away from it either. We definitely have represent, like, our companies are awesome that we work with that.
Yeah.
And we do have the like quintessential line card that a traditional rep firm has.
Of course, but like, what's the difference? What's the added value? What's the studio part, right?
Sure. The added value is that we bring more of a service to the overall project, where we really, when we get a project in our sights in the direction we can support on, mainly envelope-based products, right? Fenestration products, envelope-based products is where we're really focused on. So that Division 8 category in the CSI spec is where we kind of live. Maybe some specialties in Division 10, but when we get some of that, we get that opportunity, we go through and we actually have a completely digital format. We'll go through and we'll define the scope entirely, all the way through the specification review, all the way through the plan review, and we'll actually go through a full takeoff from a scope standpoint, quantity standpoint, any sort of misconceptions of scope or where there's going to be some trouble areas, we'll come to go through and highlight, and we'll provide scope packages not only to customers and glazing subcontractors or distributors that we work with, but also up the chain too, like into the general contractor base, into the real estate development world, to those owners reps, or even to the architectural world, saying, okay, this is what we have. This is the direction we're looking at for entirety of scope. And then because we do that as a basis of understanding of what we're actually looking at for integration too, because I mean, we all know that the division between two contracts is where the most friction lies. And so we want to make sure we're identifying that ownership over those areas of scope. And when we look at project scope, we're not only defining the people as far as what products can be associated to, but the people that are a specialty to those scopes. So if it's historical based retrofit, if it's unitized curtain wall, there is a place where those things reside in the overall contract and what that can work on. So we make sure that we network with those essential customers and architects to then employ that team to that. So we try to bridge those gaps rather than just say, yeah, hey, our window meets a certain U value. Make sure it's spec'd. You know, it's a different understanding of overall scope because we actually bring an implementation to it, because at the end of the day, that's what really is controlled by that subcontractor, that general contractor, and ultimately for the client of the real estate development company.
You mentioned your partner came from the subcontract world, and you have contractor background somewhere in that resume, right?
I do, yeah.
You guys are only providing product, though, correct? You're not providing any installation services.
That's correct. We don't provide any installation services. We have a segment of our business that does products focus, and then we also have another segment of our business called Edify Design. That is actually a project services that actually does 2D, 3D shop drawings, engineering, and BIM services to make sure that product has an architectural solution from a shop drawing effort, from a BIM effort, and those types of things. It's a place where we really try to implement those products adjacent to those envelope pieces.
I want to ask about that, but real quick on the other thing,
Sure.
where you're talking about putting the package together and getting the right people. The reason I was asking about the subcontractor is those aren't your people, but you're matching the correct subcontractors with the correct product, with the correct specifications, and you're just kind of part of that added value for you is assembling that team, so to speak.
Yeah, I learned really early on that it's people, process, and product are the three core values that I really look at, and Brad and I kind of employed that through that. And so we have the network of those glazing subcontractors that we work with and that we support. So it kind of goes both ways, whether we get an opportunity kind of from a subcontractor format, or we're working early on with an architect that we're able to kind of bring in and kind of introduce a project to a glazing subcontractor that we know that best suits some of that stuff. But yes, that's essentially where we kind of sit, is making sure that we're connecting those dots with the essential resources, for sure.
Yeah. Assembling that team, as I said, right? So I've asked all sorts of reps this. So some of them have been on the show. Where is your time better spent, with architects, general contractors, or glazing contractors?
I think it's a mix, to tell you the truth. I think it's based upon how the contract is built. There's the traditional design bid build world, where we're kind of a linear path as far as we're looking at supporting the architect in the design world, taking from concept massing and schematic phase through a design development phase into then now construction documents and those things, which then traditionally kind of put it into a bid category where we're interfacing with GCs and subs, and then working into the product manufacturing side. There's projects of how that contract is built where you're looking at early design assist. That's really kind of the majority of our background. Myself and Brad Walker is where we work really early on in projects for design assist projects.
Sure.
And really integrated project delivery, integrated project review. There's a couple different names for them.
Yeah.
But really kind of an iterative process where we go through as a target value design. But I think all three of those parties are essential to making sure that that's the case. So if it's heavy based upon that contract on the architectural side, then that's where our best value sits. If it's heavy on the subcontractor side, where we want to make sure that there's maybe some pre-glazed solutions that need to go into a project, we try to mix that. But I think it's really kind of determined by how that contract's built with the project and now it needs to get to market the quickest.
So On the topic of contracts, I know something you told me that has helped you through your career is the different areas you've worked in as a general contractor. You worked with a glazing contractor too, right?
I did. So I grew up in the like I said, I'm a fourth generation general contractor, and really kind of thought that was going to be my destination as far as just kind of stay in that world. And then through the that was early on in 2000, about 2008, kind of was fed in that world. And then in 2008, when kind of that mortgage crisis hit, I kind of pivoted from that residential, light commercial, industrial segment of general contracting to the subcontractor base side, and mainly focused on commercial construction, and did a lot of federal work in the subcontractor. So I traveled all over the country doing a lot of federal work between barracks or in transition buildings, soldier kind of family care centers.
What I wanted to ask there is something you had told me about how understanding how the stakeholders communicate and understanding contract language, how your background really helped you through the various phases of your career. So can you expand on that? Like, what are you talking about when you talk about contract language and how it differs from, say, manufacturer, subcontractor, general contractor?
Yeah, I mean, the evolution of that, and as I've looking back into it, I can see how I wanted to make sure I was constantly translating that world that I once came from general contracting, subcontracting, and how the general contractor is faced with really that cost breakdown, understanding the different specifications that he has to cover, the different purchasing and buyout plans that are then had, and then bringing it into the subcontractor world of understanding how to communicate upstream to that. So looking through that world of saying, okay, if we were able to package these specs together with these things, we could then communicate to that cost breakdown better, which would then overall then inform that project performa. And then migrating from that subcontractor world into the manufacturing side is where I most recently came from, and now really kind of am independently, is that understanding how subcontractor has to make sure that there's an understanding of schedule, there's an understanding of how that overall not only the dollars are affected, but the overall cost of that can actually be affected. So coming into the manufacturing side, looking downstream in the manufacturing world of if there's extruders or fabricators that are kind of like in that world, how they actually communicate to a performance specification, how they communicate to those contract documents that are essentially packaged up inside of that glazing subcontract or envelope subcontract. So I've constantly been understanding, kind of going into that world of saying, okay, how can I better serve that next place to ensure that it ends up in that right place? So it always informed that next party, making sure that was that's where that process really kind of came out of and stretched over the span of my career of understanding that at the end of the day, it's got to meet not only dollars and dates, but it's got to meet that performance module, and then how we're bringing that and translating that from the manufacturing world into the contract.
I think that's huge, and I've never been a general contractor, but I've been a subcontractor, and I'm a manufacturer's rep. So, it hits home a little of understanding. It's understanding your customer, and it's understanding their needs and how to fit into that module, right? Like, it's actually kind of interesting to me that we as manufacturers probably don't teach that at all. If we do, we don't do it well, of teaching what you mentioned schedule and performance, and maybe the manufacturer does an okay job teaching performance and specifications, but schedule, I don't think someone that just comes from a different industry, they're not going to understand that.
It's interesting. We get asked general questions from that contractor world as far as what lead times are.
Yeah.
And lead times, the quintessential lead time question is always something you say, okay, what's your current lead times? And I think they know, because I've come from that world, that they fluctuate based upon volume, based upon where the market is and how full you are.
They know, but the number you give is the number you give.
Right. You're not living beyond that 10 to 12 week thing that you say, right? Or that 6 to 8 week thing you say. Like, it's always going to be there. But I think the interstitial important world is that understanding that there still is that project services side of that lead time, that soft world that is always kind of multi-staged or layered to say, like, well, let's just do these two things at the same time so we can actually start manufacturing quicker, right? So we always try to educate, saying that even though that I'm going to be building it in my manufacturing world for that 10 to 12 weeks or that 8 to 6 or whatever it is, there is a understanding of communication that in order to get to that point, you have to make sure that there's a valued time of architectural approval. There's a valued time of shop drawings and understanding of implementation, because we're really translating out of those essential contract documents how it's going to be built, and building that kind of in that virtual world prior to building it in that actual manufacturing world.
Yeah, I want to open up a little bit more on the subcontractor to general contractor, because that might be something that listeners find helpful. Is, you know, if they've been doing it long enough, they know the game of they submit a bid and they're awarded and they provide shop drawings and submittals and then they order material. But like, maybe the way to ask it is, what's something they could do, or what's kind of an alternate way of thinking to better communicate to that general contractor, either pre or post bid, either way? What's something that you've thought about that kind of helped you succeed to the general contractor?
Yeah, I think one thing that I always carried to the general contracting is when we're asking about okay, give us plans or bid docs. Those are kind of some standard questions we get, like, show me the bid opportunity, let's get the link to the plans or something. And then there's a place where it's kind of forgotten, is like, what is your schedule? What is the project schedule that's demanded? Because, and then looking into not only your specs and your plans, but looking into what they are planning on and how they are planning on doing it, right? And I think looking into that schedule portion of understanding, okay, and asking then in return, like, when are you planning on, looks like you're planning on being in the field for envelope around X time between Q2 or Q3 or something like that of that certain year. Yeah. And so that means educating and talking to that. Say, okay, in order to get to there, it looks like you're going to be, looks like you're planning on that schedule as far as buying that package out in this month. Are we looking at getting that package awarded during this time? And I think we shy away from that. I think we shy away from that place of like, should we ask when they're going to award it? Should we ask when they're going to be contracting that out?
Yeah.
Because that's the inevitable question at the end of the day. That's the reason why we bid things. That's the reason why we put lump sum prices together. That's the reason why we go through quantity takeoffs and those things. But I think shying away from that question of just like, okay, what's your buyout plan? And when are you looking at buying this project out? And I think that's such an obvious thing, but I think we never really talk about it. So you asked about when, but then you ask, I think, about how. What are you guys looking about? What's your, like, are you going to be making decisions? Like, or is it going to go from a pre-con team to a project execution team, which usually is, and there's kind of that bridge between pre-con and then project executive, right, that sits there. And I think that understanding, if we don't ask those interstitial questions, we get into those places where they can be really compact or they can be really combined into a place of like, the reason why a hard bid date is a hard bid date, right? Like, is it a live rip and read? Do we have to understand some of that stuff from a design bid build for public purposes? And understanding how that is built so we can understand how we're pricing it and when that information needs to land. Because you can create momentum through a bid that actually is very educational to the general contractor. And you want to make sure that you as from the manufacturing side are aiding that for the subcontractor. You can't just be like, hey, like sure, we can send a scope sheet out early. I think one of the traditional paths, like sending a scope sheet, see what's in there. And we think that maybe some of that information could be shared around. At the end of the day, if I'm giving my best effort with my best educated bid on that, I'm trusting that the people that we're bidding to from a subcontractor standpoint want information as early as possible. They may not necessarily have the the right attention at the right time when you get it, but at least you're knowing when those things are going to land. And then you say, okay, I'll get you the quantities and sizes, or I'll get you the spec review by X time, right? How does that sound? And then once we get that done,
unpack a very important point in there that I think a lot of glazing contractors are guilty of, and my dad and I were for sure guilty of this. So I worked with my dad's small shop, and then when we closed 2010, whenever that was, I moved out west, worked for a huge company, and what I learned when we were bidding projects was that the most important question became, what is the schedule? And we started, and from pre-con, the focus was schedule, right? And how to meet that schedule. So what you said in there that I found really important, you hit the nail on the head, is the estimating team or the glazing contractor, if it's a kill what you eat kind of place, if it's one guy, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
But they can see the schedule, but they don't do what you said, is they don't say, when will you release this? What they do is they take it as their problem to meet the schedule, when what they should do is they should say, in order to meet your schedule, I need to be released by this date. And they don't do that. And I don't know if it's like you said, we're uncomfortable with it, or we're afraid we're going to lose the job, or whatever it is. The glazing contractor needs to establish those boundaries and push back where they can, and it's going to help the GC.
It is. It's going to 100% aid that overall decision. And the compression of that decision always comes down to, like, did we get it? Did we not? Like, how does that work, or what it is? You should be asking that as early as possible to understand, like, because what you want to do is consistently make that decision. Not make the decision as this, like, we're going to either fall off the Grand Canyon or we're going to launch it into space. Like, it doesn't have to be that dramatic. It doesn't have to be a place of, like, whether it's just sink or swim. It's a place of, like, well, we know that this is an opportunity that we can do it. We have to compete for it. How do you compete for that?
Yeah.
Ask those questions. Ask that early. Like, when are you going to be looking at buying this package out? Okay, great. That means in your world that there is this, and you kind of just, you don't necessarily have to go through it verbatim to, like, okay, tell me exactly when, Wednesday or Friday, like,
right.
It's a place of understanding that there's a time for that to happen. But that means that, okay, hey, let me get some of this information to you early so you can double check on where you're at. Or how does that work?
I think it's important, and it goes hand in hand with your company name of educating and enlightening, right? Is you can throw a number out there and hope you get it, and then hope you can meet the schedule, or you can put a number out there that is, with a complete scope, including, we need to order the material by this date to meet your schedule. I mean, that's all educating the general contractor and helping them meet their schedule and accomplish their goals. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, I think that it's very important to ask those eventual questions as early as possible.
Yep.
Because
everything in construction is always better as early as possible, right?
Yes. Because even when they send you the bid, you're already late. That's the thing, right? Well, we're already late, right? That's so you have to ask that and just be open door with that for sure.
I couldn't agree more. Great advice. Let's flip back to manufacturers. So you are in a pretty innovative market. Where I am, we have some innovative stuff, but it's a little different than what you're working with. We're worried about hurricanes down here. You're into some different stuff up there. I'll say in terms of energy performance primarily.
Yeah, I think we live in this market that has been heavily saturated with U value and thermal performance. Ironically, we live in one of the most temperate climates in America. Like, it's in ASHRAE map, we're like at climate zone 4. I'm in climate zone 5. We're kind of floating between those. You go into Southern Oregon, they're in climate zone 3. So we kind of are in that Pacific Northwest, but it is a mild and temperate climate. But ironically, that the thermal transmittance has been a very saturated performance requirement. So when you're looking into specifically fenestration, windows, curtain wall, storefront materials, the progression of that energy code is really kind of determined on the basis of those energy performance products. So It's been interesting to kind of see from a manufacturing point of view, as far as the manufacturers that have kind of shied away from that innovation thermally. And as a result, it's kind of invited a lot of different subsets of very innovative products to enter. And thermal-based products in the window world is a really hot topic up here all the time. So NFRC U value is a big thing. Understanding how low can that U value get? So we're looking at products that are U values of sub 3.0 into that 2.2 U value world, which is essentially for a curtain wall product and for a storefront product. Those are essentially triple glazed. That's where this next code cycle, the IECC 2021, is taking it, right? So, and we have a very progressive code official here that sets the standard for both Seattle and Washington State, and then it bleeds essentially into Oregon's energy code. And it's a place where we're looking at now all of a sudden certain percentages of envelopes have to meet that triple glazed U value. That's why I say triple glazed, because it's easier to understand. But that 0.22 U value is now a standard in the in prescriptive code, not a performance-based code. It used to be performance-based, but now it's prescriptively a certain percentage of that U value has to hit, or a certain percentage of that envelope has to hit that U value. So it's caused a lot of manufacturers to have to bring the most innovative products domestically to this place or not compete. It's really kind of that black and white.
So what are you seeing? Are you seeing manufacturers in that market have left to chase more, I'll say, commodity type business instead of that? I mean, it's kind of specialty, right?
It is. I have. I mean, there is. I have seen a lot of manufacturers kind of depart the market, and in the overall innovation sector, if you look at kind of the overall percentage of what percent of the market are innovators, what percentage of the market are early adopters, early majority, late majority type of segments of that market, we sit really in that innovation sector to that early adopter category, and that doesn't really kind of demand a lot of commodity-based products, or if it does, it basically introduces different thermal transmission products that won't be traditionally used, say in a high school or in an airport or in a hospital or something like that.
Brad, you're saying your products that you rep are in that area, or your territory there is in that area of early adopter?
The territory specifically for the Pacific Northwest is very innovative. So that code basis that we sit here in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle specifically, is extremely thermally efficient. Products are used as a standard. So what's
your take on that as a whole, right? Like energy efficient, like we could just broadly label as good. That's a good thing. Being energy efficient is a good thing. But where does it can it go too far that products are now too expensive? That is there a point where we've gone too far, or do we just need to go as far as possible? I don't know. I'm a little ignorant on it.
No, please. I appreciate the question. It's an interesting discussion, because I've done some case studies between we had a code that basically decided prescriptive based products and then a performance based design. So we said, prescriptive based, performance based, and I've done case studies that have actually shown both. And it's really kind of an accounting process that has to happen in the design place of like, how much energy is this building actually using from an envelope perspective, and from a thermal transmittance standpoint, and really kind of creating those overall 3D models of what's happening there and accounting that. Now, as a result of that accounting process that has to happen, so it can be proven to the code official, it can be proven to the design team that's the case. You have to have all that testing paperwork and all of that innovative product validation that actually comes with those products. And I would say by majority, for Seattle, because we sit in that early adopter innovative world, we don't sit in those just standard, just single thermally broken storefront world. It's or a high performance thermally efficient pressure plate and curtain wall. You have to actually sit in a place where it actually is really, really focused on what that thermal bridge is. So we're looking at module sizes. We're looking at a lot of different opportunities rather than just a standard NFRC size. We're looking at how that is designed into it and where those thermal bridge points are along that entire facade. So it forces that manufacturer to bring forward a lot of that early vetting process of a product, essentially. And that's, at the end of the day, to bring that product to market with that essential paperwork, that's a lot of cost from a manufacturing standpoint. There's a lot of cost that's in that vetting process, in that design product, in order to get it to that innovative and early adopter world, versus like early majority, late majority products that are not necessarily as demanded to be as thermally as efficient. Those have been around for 20, 30 years, and they've been vetted out. And so the costs of those those are already vetted out and paid for and done. So it's a place where you have to really be innovative about that early works standpoint for a product.
That's kind of where my brain was as you described it, is energy efficient, good, innovation, good, right? But like the tipping scale of the cost of all that testing, and as manufacturers leave that space, you have less competition. I mean, it seems like it would be very hard to argue against the code, right? But there's got to be someone that can make that argument of the cost is too great, or the carbon footprint of these products. I don't know. I don't know where that scale tips.
No, it's I look at it in conversely in the world of a product that actually does need to have testing for hurricane impact, and if it's a large missile or a small missile impact, that testing has to come prior to actually. That's the basis of our design world, is that code, right? That's the bottom of the barrel, is that code requirement. So if that's the minimum of what we have to get to, we have to get all the way up to that minimum, right? Yeah. And in conversely speaking, there's not like a standard product, even from a storefront standpoint, just saying, hey, let's put some storefront in and put some standard glass in, that would generally work in probably about 80% of the country. But you got these kind of corners of the world, like you in Florida, here and us in the Northwest, this is really energy driven. So that's a minimum that these products have to get to. Same thing with like a large missile, small missile testing. Those go through some really rigorous tests to get there, and so it leaves a lot of that domestic product that is generally manufactured in the center of the country. From a window perspective, kind of they're not in that neighborhood, so it's a foreign conversation bringing some of those domestic manufacturers by saying, hey, Midwest Window Company X, we have to meet a 22U value prescriptively. And they go, okay, well, are you going to do a vinyl window, or what's the deal here? Like, are you going to do a fiberglass window? Like, we don't make those products. We make aluminum products. Yeah. Like, okay, well, what are we looking at for your thermal break? And then all of a sudden, these really detailed questions start to happen into the manufacturer. And that feels like to a manufacturer, coming from a designer to a manufacturer, that conversation almost looks like they're trying to unzip and going, what are your secrets of your sauce? What are your 23 herbs and spices that are inside your product? Sure. And that can be very intrusive to a manufacturer. That can be very, it's like, well, what do you mean? You know what I mean? It's like, we pour into Bridget, like that's what we do. Because it has to be thermally broken. Well, is your thermal break efficient that it's actually taking from a 0.10 to a 0.90? And they go, how does this architect know that? Like, why is that important? So it's speaking two different languages, like coming to that code minimum. And so as a result of that, I've seen a lot of manufacturers stop innovating for this market. And as a result, it's invited a lot of non-domestic products to enter. And to come within where thermal efficiency has been standard for 15, 20 years. You know what I mean? So it's interesting to kind of start to see a little bit of that the immigration of other products start to arrive here, and they go, and then the standard question gets asked conversely from the architect. Well, how many years has this been around? 20 years. Like, well, where can I go see it?
Yeah.
No, you can't go see it because this is the only code set in the country, or I guess I'm probably not proprietary to it, but one of the only markets in the country that requires that level of energy efficiency. And so you meet some of those points where you start getting, well, you can go see it, but it's currently sitting in Germany, it's currently sitting in a different country, or, you know what I mean? And you see these areas where like, well, why isn't it here? It's like, well, because we just implemented this code cycle. So trying to educate the market to that, both on the design side and the manufacturing side, is really kind of that Edify Studios responsibility. That's what we feel, that to improve both mind and character is that we have to basically be that interstitial point for sure.
And I know we've seen some stuff in the past and also recently about tariffs on
yes,
certain international manufacturers or non-domestic manufacturers, I should say. So that can come into the equation too. We've covered you as a general contractor, as a glass subcontractor, as a manufacturer, as a manufacturer's rep. But you went from what we'll call a W-2 company manufacturer's rep to starting Edify Studios. And
correct.
We've kind of established that. But tell me the story of when that clicked in your brain to do that.
It's always been something that I've been asked about, are you going to start your own business, or are you going to, is that something you want to do? Is that something that's there? And I've always been kind of that, a very type A personality where I want to make sure that there's a place of, hey, I've got this, so you can trust this and we can work on this together, in a partnered mentality. So I've always kind of taken that partnership level into my conversations or into my projects. And so I've been asked that. And the story that I kind of go back into, the reason why, where it clicked for me is like, you know what, I think it's time to do that, is I was working on a project in Portland. It was a hospital project down on the waterfront, and I was there early for a design meeting. I arrived early, kind of in the morning, for an 8:00 meeting. I was there probably an hour early, had some time to kill. It was like, okay, I'll just kind of go and hang out into an adjacent tower and go into the lobby and just kind of do some work on my phone or get on my laptop and try to see if I can get some stuff done or emails completed before this meeting starts. And as I was sitting in this lobby next to this hospital, it was a large tower, really nice lobby, and I realized that I was in a assisted and independent living center, and I knew it was there, and I was like, okay, I'll just and I saw one of the residents come down onto the elevator and kind of do his laps around the lobby, and I just observed it. It was just interesting to watch. And then he kind of came and sat down right next to me and sparked up a conversation. We were chatting about obviously the weather or what the local sports team was doing or how things were going, and got introduced to him. And it was a gentleman. It was about 84 years old, and he just said, "I'm like, what do you got planned for the day? What's your day looking like?" And he goes, "Man," so well, I got my walk-in, and I was like, oh, okay. And I said, what was that? And he goes, yeah, every morning I'll come down, grab some breakfast, and then kind of get my walk-in. If it's raining outside, I'll go outside and kind of do kind of a walk around the neighborhood, or I'll just kind of walk around the lobby. And it was interesting to have that conversation with him, because obviously me being prior to starting this, I was just considering a lot of those conversations were coming at me. Is that something you kind of want to do? And as I saw my network of architects and general contractor, subcontractor world, they were kind of upcycling into their careers and kind of vertically growing. And as I sat there, I completed that conversation of what the destination of this 84-year-old man was basically there. And that's kind of what he does. He goes, I'll probably talk to my family a little bit later, and kind of gave me his 8 to 5 schedule versus my 8 to 5 schedule. And left that conversation and thought to myself, I'm like, if that's the destination, right? 84 years old and retired, and that's the direction he's ended up in. If I was that person now, looking back on me now, like what would I want to do?
Sure.
And one of the biggest things that I saw that really kind of it's kind of been a true north for me is I never really wanted to look back and say, I wish, right?
Sure.
And that quintessential understanding of like looking back and saying, I wish I would have, right? And living with that regret, regardless of how it turned out, regardless if that was the direction, but understanding 84 years old, the destination that was, I didn't want to have that statement of I wish I would have, and I didn't. And it's something that really moved me from a decision standpoint. And it really moved me from taking that understanding of like time is now. And I think we have a responsibility to create that self-awareness, right? We have that responsibility as humans to really understand that there is people in our lives randomly that can be in our lives and inspire us any day of the week, no matter if it's 7:00 in the morning on a Tuesday, or if it's on the afternoon or Sunday morning or anything like that. We want to make sure that we're always being aware of that, and they can inspire us. That humanity experience of looking into that and going, you know what? I'm not going to be that person that says I wish. I'm not going to live with that. And so, that motivated me more than anything to say, you know what? It's time to go. It's time to do this. And has it been the most wild ride I would experience? Absolutely, John. Absolutely. But the most fulfilling experience, I think, is just to basically know that I can look into my kids and my family's eyes and understand is that I know that I don't live with that. I know that I actually showed them that I don't live with that. I don't live with that statement. I wish I would have.
Yeah.
And that was huge.
That's good. How quickly after that experience did you start?
I want to say it was about 24 months after that experience. So it's fairly quick.
Do you remember the guy's name?
I remember his name was John. I remember he was from Iowa. And I don't
shout out to John from Iowa for kickstarting you. No, that's good. That's powerful. You don't want to live like that. I try to live like that I can't say I'm perfect, but avoiding those things you'll regret, right?
Yeah, and I think that human experience that we go through, I mean, we understand that is that it's a place where that we have that responsibility to talk to that next generation. We have that, I mean, both in the builder or boomer generation or in that Gen Z or Gen Y or experience. I find myself in the Gen X world. So we have the responsibility to expand that. And I think that learning from and also from both sides is going to be really, really important. You know what I mean? And that was, I think it was a key point for me as far as really kind of starting and going down the path.
That's a good story, Brad. Brad, greatly appreciate your time, man. Thanks for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you having me.